There are so many fun ways to use Adobe Illustrator in your designing, and over the last several years that I've become more accustomed with how to use Illustrator, I've learned all these tips and tricks and little techniques that I use over and over again, and they make designing really fun, but also make it a little bit easier. So I wanted to just show you real quick 5 of my favorite tricks and techniques in Illustrator that I use all the time. So let's get started. The first one I want to show you is called typing on a path. It is a technique that I use all the time in either artwork or for web graphics, and it's fun because you can really customize where you want your text to be exactly on your artwork. So let me show you what to do. The first thing you need to do is create a path. So I use the pencil tool, and I'll just kind of draw a slight curve here. And then I can use the flyout menu. So if you just hold your mouse down on the type tool, then scroll down to type on a path tool, click on that, and now click on your path, and you can just begin typing. Now from here you can customize your font, so I'll just highlight that, change it to the font I would like. And then you can enlarge it, you can change the color. If you want it to move a little bit, you can just grab this little line bar here and pull it to where you want it, or you can use the space bar. That also works if you want to just kind of gently nudge it. So come in here and just space bar. And then you have it just on a path. Now you don't have to do this with a freehand path. You can use any of the preset shapes also within Illustrator. So I'll show you how to do just maybe if you want to do some text on a curved ellipse shape, so some arched text. First I'll create my ellipse, and then I'll use my type on a path tool. I'm going to change the font, and I'll just type in maybe a date. And now you'll see when I click off, now it's curved. If you want that to be centered, again, I just grab this little, once you take your mouse and hover it right over into this line, you can kind of grab your whole text here and move it. I usually just eyeball this one because I feel like you can get a good enough idea of where you want it to go. So eyeball that, and now you have that nice arched text. So it's a really fun tool to use in lots of different ways. There's just 2 examples for you. Okay, let's move on to my technique number 2, which is duplicate. This one has a keyboard shortcut that you can use to easily duplicate your previous action. I'll show you what I mean. If I take a circle, and I'm just going to change the color really quickly. And if I wanted to make a little pattern, so if I grab my circle, by holding down Shift and Option at the same time, Shift will keep my circle in line, and then Option will copy it and make a second copy of it. And I get it right where I want it. Now if I hit Command D for duplicate, it will replicate that last motion that I just made. So I can make a whole bunch of these little circles here. And then if I want to, I can grab this whole line, again, hold down Shift and Option to keep it right in line, and place that where you want it, and again duplicate this whole row, and now you have a really easy way to make a pattern. Another fun way that I use this, let me just move this up a little bit. If I want to create a diagonal stripe line, I'll show you what I do here. So if I make my diagonal line, I just need to give it a stroke, and I'll make it a little bit thick here so we can see it. Now I'll just take that line, again hold down Option and Shift to drag it over and make a copy. And then I'll duplicate that over and over and over. And now I have a diagonal line. To take it one step further, I can clip this into an exact shape that I want it. So if I take my little rectangle tool and I grab everything behind here, group those together. Click on the top shape and the bottom shape. Command 7 will make a clipping mask. I'll talk about that in just a second, so don't worry if you're lost. But now I've clipped that into a perfectly spaced little diagonal stripe line. So this duplicate tool is really great just because it keeps everything perfectly spaced out, but it also saves you a little bit of time. Okay, let's move on to that clipping mask tool that I just talked about. Now, I'll tell you, I probably use a clipping mask in almost every single thing I create. I just really love this. A lot of times you'll see a word or a little motif that has some texture or pattern to that particular image, and I always make those using clipping masks. I will show you what I mean. So if I wanted to make maybe some waves if I were doing a little ocean print. I'll just use my pencil tool and I'll create the shape of some waves, just some little doodles here. And then I like to kind of take it off the page just to connect this whole thing together. I'll show you, if I put a fill on this, you'll see what that shape will look like. Now it looks great with just a solid color, but a lot of times I like to have a little bit more texture or pattern in there. And the easiest way I found to do this is by grabbing some sort of pre-made digital scrapbook paper. A lot of times I'll purchase it. Sometimes I can make my own patterns, like in that duplicate tool that we just learned. So sometimes I'll make my own patterns. Sometimes I'll use purchased or free digital scrapbook paper, which actually is probably what I do most of the time. So I grab that from my file and bring it into Illustrator. And then I'm just going to send this to the back. So what I'm trying to do here is make my waves and cut it out of this scrapbook paper. So I'm going to do that with a clipping mask. First, you'll click on your top shape just with your regular selection arrow, and then you'll hold down Shift, click on your background, and now Command 7 will cut those waves out of the paper. Isn't that cute and fun? Let me show you again with another thing. If you don't want to hand draw an item, again, you can use one of these preset shapes. So this time I'll do a star. Get your star where you want it. Then I'm going to grab my scrapbook paper. You just want to make sure that your paper is behind, or your pattern is behind your shape that you're cutting out. So again, I'll select my top shape, hold down Shift, click on the back paper, Command 7, or if you are on a PC, it will be Control. On a Mac, it's Command 7, and then that will cut out your shape. Super fun. Now, you've probably seen words cut out, and you can do it the exact same way with text. So I'm going to grab this little picture of ranunculus. Those are my favorites. And I'm just going to type a word. Let's do bloom. I'm going to change the font to just be a little bit bolder. And I'll resize it a little bit. Now again, I want my text to be on top. Kind of place it where you want it to be. And now select the top, Shift, and select the back. And then Command 7 will cut it out. And as easy as that, you have such a fun look. Okay, let's go on to number 4, which is the reflect tool, reflect technique. For this one, I'm going to just do a little hand drawing here real quick of a little laurel kind of wreath. So I'm using the pencil tool. You can use the blob brush tool if you'd rather. I just generally like to work in the pencil tool. Now the thing about a pencil tool is when you get really close to your path, you'll see there is a little X, and then when I get close to the line, the X goes away, which means that by drawing, it will edit what I've just done. So I don't want to do that, and here's my little workaround for it. There's probably a better way, but this is what I do. I just draw a little line over here where I'm not going to use it, and then I go through and I can draw my leaf, and I'll draw another leaf. Again, if I don't do a little mark over here, it just means that I'll edit this path that I've already drawn, which will kind of mess up my shape. Okay, so real quick, I'll just draw these little leaves. I use the pencil tool most of the time when I'm doing any drawing or illustrating. Illustrator is best known for its pen tool, which is the best tool you can use to illustrate, but here's the thing, it's so complicated sometimes. So I just find that just freehand drawing works for me with this pencil tool. Okay, so once I have all my little leaves done, almost there. None of them are perfect, and you can definitely come in here and edit them once you've drawn them. Once you do something, you can always go back and fix it. Okay, last one. Here are my leaves. Now I want those to be filled in instead of just the outline of them. So I'm going to do that by grabbing this whole group, but then deselecting the line, because I do want the little stem to just be a line. And I can do that by holding down Shift and clicking on the item I want unincluded. So I've done that, and I'm just going to change this to a fill instead of stroke. And there's my little branch of leaves. Now I can just get rid of all these little marks that I made. Okay, so the reflect tool, if I want this exact same branch just reflected over here, instead of having to draw another one, I can just grab this whole thing. I'm going to group it by Command G, and then I can right click, go to Transform and Reflect. And then you can choose to either reflect it horizontally or vertically. In this case, I'm going to go vertical. And then instead of just reflecting only this item, I'm going to actually make a copy of it, which is really nice. And now I've reflected it. I can just move it over here, and I have my own little wreath that I've made of these laurel branches. If I wanted this to be a complete circle, now I can just take both of those, again, either right click or you can come up to Object and Transform and Reflect. This time I'm going to go horizontally, again make a copy, and then move it into place. And just so easily, all you have to create is just one side of that little branch, and now you can get a full wreath. The other great thing about this is you can come in here and you can edit. So if I wanted to have another leaf just on this side, I can add that really easily just by drawing in more. So super easy and fun tool. And now let's go on to the fifth one. The final one I'll talk about is the Align tool. Now, I was probably designing in Illustrator for about 3 years before I knew this existed. And I was always trying to line things up on the center of the page. And I just did it kind of by eyeballing, which was fine. But once I found out that there's just a button that you push and it's so instant, it really made things a lot easier. So let me just draw something really quickly. And so if I make this little heart, let me give it a fill here. And if I want that to be perfectly centered on my page, again, I can kind of move it and eyeball it. And there are those smart guides that kind of help you with that. But the easiest way is just to use your Align tool. You can find that from Window and then Align. I actually usually keep this in my panel just because I use it often. And then you can choose how you want to align it, either to the left on the horizontal or centered, which is generally what I use. So if I click on that, now it's perfectly centered on my artboard horizontally. I can also do that vertically, which is nice to get it perfectly centered on my artboard. And it's so easy just by using that tool. So there you go, you guys, my top 5 favorite tricks and techniques that I use in Illustrator. Almost every single time I open Illustrator, I'm using probably all 5 of these for pretty much everything I make. So hopefully those are helpful. Maybe you learned a new trick or two. And if you'd like to learn more about Illustrator, I'm so excited to introduce this new class that I've created called Simplified Graphic Design. I go over all of these techniques in a little bit further detail, along with a bunch of other things, just to help you use Illustrator and feel really comfortable moving around and being able to create to your heart's desire. So I will have lots more information about that, but hopefully this stuff will get you excited and started with designing using Illustrator.